Okay, for our next panel, which is 9 billion people, opportunity or Armageddon, we have a poll question, which in a sense is I guess it's a nice summary question. You know, you've been here a couple days now, you've heard a lot, and maybe this is, a vote of confidence, thumbs up, thumbs down on our future. So, by 2050, the world's population is going from 6 to 9 billion. Do you think this represents A, opportunity, or B, disaster? While you're voting, I have a feeling I know how this vote's going to come out, but while you're voting, I'd like to introduce Poppy Harlow, who's the anchor of CNN Money, and she's going to help us sort this out with a terrific panel. So let's give a welcome to Poppy.
Hi everyone, good morning. Thank you for being here. I hope you're having a great time. I promise you it's not sunny at all outside, so don't even think of escaping. Let me introduce our panel. We've got about 32 minutes, so we'll try to get right to it, but I'll start at the end. Jerry Steiner, he's the Executive Vice President of Sustainability and Corporate Affairs for Monsanto. He leads Monsanto teams in about 70 countries around the world. Next to him, we have Glenn Prickett. He's the Chief External Affairs Officer for the Nature Conservancy. Before that, he was for 13 years at Conservation International. Right here, we have Rich, is it Lechner?
Yes.
Lechner, VP of Energy and Environment for IBM. He leads IBM's efforts in green and beyond as part of what we've all heard of IBM's Smarter Planet initiative. And then sitting right next to me is Curtis Frasier. He's the Executive Vice President at Shell. He's been there since 1982. Wow, a lot has changed.
A lot has changed.
A lot has changed. So you all have the question. I'd love to get your votes in. But I want to start out with two things. I want to read first a quote from Fred Pierce. He recently wrote an opinion piece in Yale's 360 about this exact issue. And at the end, he summarized it by saying, rising populations may bring more mouths to feed, but they also bring more hands to work and brains to think. Do you believe that's the case, or do you believe that the problems of today will just remain and be enlarged and become intensified as we add people to this planet? So I want to start out with you, Glenn, first, talking about the problem with feeding and housing 9 billion people.
Right. Well, first, I want to thank you, Poppy, and the whole Fortune team for this terrific conference. The Nature Conservancy is a program partner, and I've been here all 3 years, and it keeps getting better, so we're proud to be part of it. And I guess I would start by answering the question, and I definitely vote for opportunity over Armageddon. I'm a stubborn optimist. I don't think you can be in the conservation world and not be an optimist. And I say that because I'll start by reviewing some of the gloomy statistics. I'll try to be brief about that because I think really we want to talk about the opportunity.
Yeah.
But I think the challenge, obviously that 9 billion number is huge and that's a significant growth, but it masks some even bigger challenges that we're going to face as a planet. And I think the key issue that we often lose sight of sitting here in the United States and in Orange County and in Laguna Niguel overlooking this spectacular area is the challenge of poverty, which is still very much with us. Over 1 billion people live in poverty. And so the increase in the absolute population is also going to, needs to entail an increase in the living standard for those people. And the figures are striking. That billion tends to be a consistent number. So you've got over 1 billion people living in poverty. Some of the key issues that we need to be thinking about from a sustainability perspective, I would say, are energy, water, and food. And delivering all that is going to be a challenge. But you have, again, about 1 billion people, over 1 billion people, that don't have access to electricity today. And amazingly, over the last 25 years, electricity has been brought to about 1 billion people. But that number really hasn't budged because population growth is exceeding the amount of people we bring electricity to. And experts say that under business as usual in 2030, you could still have over 1 billion people with no electricity. Water, it's the same story. You have over 1 billion people living in water-scarce areas and who don't have access to clean water. And food. Amazingly, the number of hungry people has been going up in the last few years, not down. So we just topped 1 billion hungry people who go to bed hungry every night. So I think the point I want to emphasize with all of those statistics is particularly in the environmental movement in this country, and as we think about climate change as our big issue, we tend to think about, okay, we have what we have, now how do we make it more efficient? Or how do we swap out high carbon energy for low carbon energy? But a huge part of the challenge globally is not just going to be changing what we have, but helping people get more. So how do you get more with less impact?
It's a great point. So now I want to talk to the three companies that we have represented. Let's start with you, Jerry, on the food issue. How does Monsanto and your competitors, how do you feed more and more mouths more efficiently? And is becoming a vegetarian the solution?
Well, let me talk, first of all, our business and really that of our competitors is fundamentally built on the premise that if you look at this question right here, we strongly believe not only that it is an opportunity, we believe actually that we all must think of it as an opportunity, because if we don't think of it as an opportunity, this will be a disaster. Mm-hmm. We all need to make the investments necessary to have a planet that adequately feeds, houses, people and does it in an environmentally sustainable way. I think of really two things, and they're really at each end of our value chain. On the front end, we're fundamentally a research company. We're spending about $1 billion a year on improving seeds. I think one example, and this is an example that is hidden as you're driving down the road, because what I'm going to talk about is below the soil line, but perhaps the biggest difference that we've made in corn plants in the last decade is that we have put much better root systems on these plants than what they had before. And I'm a kid, grew up on a Wisconsin farm, and you could remember at the end of the year where you could literally reach down and you could pull these roots out of the ground right there. I don't know how much weightlifting I would have to do to get them out of the ground today. You can't, and it's because they have much better root systems. That's from the investment in breeding and also from a Bt protein that we've put in there to protect them from the bugs. What that does is enable those plants to pull water out of the soil profile so much more effectively than they used to. When they pull water out, they pull nitrogen out. As a result, a bushel of corn that we produce today takes 37% less nitrogen than just 20 years ago, and we have to go a whole lot further. Nitrogen is the single biggest carbon footprint that growing that corn crop has. So seeds that produce more and use resources far more wisely is the big front end piece of it. The back end piece of it gets at poverty, and that's where this is not, it's a really big business opportunity, but it's also a really big business responsibility in that it's really sad when you look at the food crisis of 2008 that many, many of those people who were hungry had their principal occupation be that of a farmer. They're not even producing enough for their own family, so they couldn't even take advantage of the fact that food was more expensive because they were net buyers, not net sellers. We have to help those people produce more. You have to look at this as a system. One example, in Burkina Faso this year, we had the first farmers be able to plant cotton that had the Bt gene in that protects itself against insects. Mm-hmm. We were able to work with the cotton gins and devise a cashless business model that enabled these farmers who don't have a lot to put that stuff in the ground. After the first year, about a third of the cotton is that way. Income is up 80%. Sure. So it works.
It works. I want to get to Rich. Before that, I want to get to the results of our quick poll. Pretty even divide. 52% responded saying 9 billion people will be a disaster. Come on. And 48 said it will be an opportunity. So, Rich, how is IBM taking hold of this opportunity / Armageddon?
Well, when I saw Armageddon on the title, I emptied my mini bar last night. So, I'm hoping,
Never have to pay the bill.
I'm actually kind of hoping for Armageddon at this point, otherwise I have some explaining to do. But I think the two issues that we're focused on, many, but two I would point out. One is water that Glenn mentioned. It's over 1 billion people without access to safe, potable water today. And that problem is only going to become more pronounced. So we're doing a couple things in that area. One is, and it may be surprising or counterintuitive to you, but our expertise in nanotechnology and in cooling of technology in the IT space is being applied to, last week we made an announcement in Saudi Arabia of a solar-powered desalination plant that uses concentrated photovoltaic and uses some unique technology from IBM that allows for up to 3 times greater concentration of sun on on the silicon because of a liquid metal underpinning it that dissipates the heat more effectively. So by doing that, it will allow concentrated photovoltaic to be more commercially viable. Why is it appropriate in this topic? Because we're using that energy to power this desalination process, and we're using our expertise in nanotechnology and chemistry to develop membranes that are more effective at repelling contaminants, oil and other contaminants, so that the membranes don't get clogged. And the consequence of that is that the water passes through the membrane more effectively and requires up to 50% less energy for the desalination process. So desalination is going to be crucial, we believe. And by the way, the same technology can be applied in well water in places like Africa or many places in the United States, in fact, where there's a high degree of arsenic in the water. And these membranes are far more effective at taking out these dangerous chemicals. So we're doing a number of things in the area of water. I think the other challenge that we face with these 9 billion people is not how many they are, but where they're at. And the rapid urbanization and the fact that we're on a course to build 11 New York cities every year for the next 30 years is a frightening prospect, right? And so dealing with the concentration of the population and building the infrastructures that will allow those people to coexist in an efficient manner with the resources available, energy, water, carbon, other materials, is a big challenge.
All right, I want to get to Curtis, and also please have your questions because we'll be handing the microphone around, so I'd love to get your questions in here soon. But talking about the issue of where people are going to be, and especially masses in urban environments, transportation comes to mind. Take a look at China. In terms of buyers of automobiles, they outpaced the United States last year. There's a rising middle class that want their own transportation, and that's a major issue when it comes to how do you fuel those vehicles.
Yeah, we do a little scenario planning every so often in Shell. It's one of our favorite things to do, and we looked at what would the world look like in 2050. So a great date on the question here, and it involved all of that stuff. What is, first of all, the number of people and where they're going to live and how they're going to work all changes dramatically over that period of time. And as we started to measure what the world would look like and how it might get there and what decisions might need to be taken between now and then, one of the things that emerged to us is that the world could get to 2050 in one of two ways. It could either get there through kind of a chaotic scramble where markets work to fill in voids, and with the lack of legislation or a plan of some kind, we're just left to our own devices. So crisis happens. So it is a disaster in a way, and then people rush in to fix disasters, and there are opportunities in fixing those disasters. And the other way would be, if there were more of a blueprint in mind, that we could get to the 2050 time frame. And in either case, in our opinion, the world survives. So it's not Armageddon, but in the world of a blueprint kind of a way to get there, the world gets there in better shape, and it's better for people and business than to get there through kind of a scramble resource. So that's why we're more engaged in the public debate than we ever have been, is because we look at this as both an opportunity but also a very difficult path to get from here to there. And so part of that is around how do we want to get there.
I think the question, I do want to get some questions, but quickly here, will oil fuel our lives in 2050?
Well, it'll have to be part of the big mix. I mean, I think one of the difficult questions, and it's because it's difficult, people don't want to wrestle it to the ground, but if you look at the energy policy we have in the United States, that's kind of an inside joke because there is no energy policy in the United States. We desperately need an energy policy, but we can't agree to it because it's a difficult thing. And people, it's easy to hate oil. But we can't live without oil, and we can't get to 2050 without petroleum products being a fundamental, important part of energizing society between now and then. So I think it's interesting, even for those of us who are well steeped in all the data, to sit here for the 2.5 days and hear people debate nuclear versus solar versus wind and how are we going to get there. It can become very confusing. It's really hard to put all the pieces together. But I think that's what has to happen. We're going to have the discipline of trying to put it all together. And you can't stop things. We don't have the luxury to stop things. So it would be, maybe the world would be a better place if we use no petroleum products, but we can't live tomorrow doing that, and we can't get to the next day without doing that. So given that, how are we going to do that the best we can?
All right, questions? Anyone questions yet? Do we have one? Yes.
Hi, this is Kevin McGovern from the Water Initiative. I'd like to ask the gentleman from IBM, how much assessment have you done? We all know solar consumes water. We know desal discharges water in the brine. And we also know many people who construct desal plants say there needs to be more optimization with respect to the distribution system. To what extent have you assessed the net effect of your solar desal plants in terms of consuming or conserving water?
So this desal plant is construction will be completed at the end, and it'll be in production at the end of next year. So we announced it, and it's based on technology that was developed over the past 12 months. We have a fairly deep team of analytics folks who are looking at all aspects of it, including what do you do with the brine. The purpose of this project, frankly, is to prove out the concept that this can scale and deliver the efficiencies that we believe it can, and it does in the laboratory. I'm not suggesting that desalination is the only answer or that we've solved all aspects of it, but absolutely has to be part of the equation for providing potable drinking water to 9 billion people. But we do have one of the advantages that IBM brings to the water question into this bigger question of how do we support 9 billion people on this planet is we have the largest mathematics department outside of academia. And I would suggest to you that the greatest strength that we bring to the table is that mathematics department and our ability to do an analysis of these issues.
Going to get to more questions in a minute, but I want to go down the row here, starting with Jerry, and just a quick one-word answer, and then we'll get it more in depth. Is government helping or hurting right now?
Neutral.
Oh, okay.
I say that because, look, there are policies that have been very good. I would call the conservation reserve policies, conservation security policies, which have made a difference in environmental quality. I'm sure that the farm program could be different, but in the end, farmers are letting today economics drive, and we're getting some pretty good results out of that. It could be better, so it's a mix.
Any governments around the world, I mean, you work globally, that are really helping, that are being more cooperative, say, than in the United States, that are making more progress for their nation?
Well, I think Brazil is doing an excellent job on increasing productivity and getting it more broadly done. And they're, I think, ramping up that in parallel with environmental protection. The two of them have to be partners with one another.
And look at Brazil's transportation and look at ethanol from sugarcane in Brazil, something proven much more successful than our attempt at corn-based ethanol in this country. But the rest of you, do you want to weigh in on whether you think government's helping or hurting?
Yeah, I'll say absolutely helping, and we need to do it more and we need to do it better. And I would just sort of flag two key issues. One is the point Jerry just raised on conservation. So one of the paradoxes we deal with is that we absolutely need to make energy and water and food production more efficient per acre, or more energy efficient in terms of our use of energy. But as we make those technologies more efficient, we actually increase pressure to convert natural habitat to other uses, which seems a little bit paradoxical, but if a marginal acre today can make more money tomorrow with an improved crop variety, you'll see pressure to develop that acre. So we need government and we need the private sector to be working with us on active conservation programs. I'm actually proud to say that all three of the companies up here are working with the Nature Conservancy on conservation in agricultural lands, in areas where energy is being developed, and in water in particular. And just a little anecdote to add to some of the debate on renewable energy. I was last week over in the Mojave and Sonoran deserts here in Southern California, and this is an example of that point. So we want to see renewables scale up. We want to see wind and solar come down the cost curve, but you're seeing now a land rush in the deserts of this country, and you'll see that in other parts of the world for renewables development. And the environmental impact is not zero. There is an environmental footprint in terms of land use, habitat conversion, and water use from solar, thermal in this case, and from wind. So we're very pragmatic. There has to be more energy production. There has to be more clean energy production. We're working with the state of California, the Bureau of Land Management, to get ahead of that and say, what are the areas that should be developed, and try to concentrate eliminate those, and what are the areas that need to be set aside for conservation? And importantly, how do you create mechanisms so that money from the development, some of the profits from the development flow into the conservation of what needs to be protected? So maintaining the environmental services is a critical piece where we need government support in this country and around the world.
I would say it's definitely helping, and we have lots of proof points. Progressive state and local governments in the United States, City of New York, for example, City of San Francisco, internationally, Ireland, Singapore, Amsterdam, all very leading examples, Malta. The thing I would ask for, or that we see as an inhibitor, is the fragmentation of government policy and agencies is inhibiting our ability to treat this as a systemic problem, right? Our point of view, or in sort of core to the notion of the smarter planet, is you need to treat these systems as systems, not as stovepiped, sort of isolated components. And you look at Sacramento Valley, and there's well over 100 agencies that have some say in water in the Sacramento Valley. So how do you go about doing this? So, and I'm not suggesting, revamping of regulatory structure, but at a minimum, interagency cooperation and data sharing is absolutely mandatory, and frankly, far too little spoken about. But if we're going to construct smart cities, if we're going to build a water infrastructure or a smart grid that spans the country to support all the things we've been talking about the last 2 days, you need to have better cooperation and coordination between the agencies.
And I think when you listen to the president speak, either campaigning or now in office, about smart grids and what they'll mean to the American people, you ask the average American, they have no idea what that means for them, and but they just know that they don't have it now, and yet they hear about it. And I think that that's a source of frustration. Any more questions yet? Okay. Do you want to address the issue of government?
Yeah, I think I agree. Government's helping. Politics is the enemy of good government, though. And so I think the encouraging to me is Department of Energy and Department of Interior, just in the last few weeks, have come out and made some decisions that are going to not be popular with some
Offshore
people.
drilling is what we're talking.
And so it's a difficult question for them, and they're making it be a fact-based, science-based decision-making process, and I applaud that. I think that's great. But if that's the federal government, and the tyranny of smaller subdivisions of government, making it all the more difficult on some of the items, like climate change, for example. We have to do this even beyond the federal government, and that's where if you're going to follow a blueprint for how we're going to get forward in a better way, it becomes very, very difficult. But I think back to what Francis said on maybe the first panel we saw, which was we just have to do something. We have to do something, but who is going to step out and take big risk in the absence of some framework? So we've got to get government to provide a framework. We've got to make sure they don't try to pick winners and losers and get too political in it, so the bills get bigger and bigger and bigger as everyone tries to take care of special interests in their own hometown. But provide the framework and let people get started, because time is our enemy.
Rich, as the global population grows, here in the United States and elsewhere, people want more and more for themselves, more gadgets, more cars, more possessions. Speaking about just electronic gadgets, et cetera, can a growing population possess the amount that they want right now?
I think that the question is, can we supply that? Yes. Can we supply it in a sustainable way? And what do we do with the refuse of that, right? So absolutely need more efficient recycling of these technologies than we have today, and more focused on that. We are doing quite a bit of that ourselves. We believe to be the largest recycler of IT equipment in the world. We don't deal with phones and all, but certainly that's part of the question is the recycling of this equipment and the utilization of it, so that, do people really need 3 phones, or do we really need servers that are utilized 7%?
And what about making them so they last longer? I mean,
more
my iPod breaks
upgradability,
every
more
few
compatibility
years.
between devices, so that you don't have to have different chargers for every phone you own or every personal device. Yes.
It's possible?
It is possible, and the good news is progress is being made there. We'd like to see it faster, though, for sure.
Any questions? Okay, one of the questions that I wanted to address with all three of you, we'll start with you, Jerry, is if we're going to solve the growing population issue, because as we look at it now, it is not stopping. I mean, our population is growing rapidly. What needs to be involved that is not today? So from an agricultural standpoint, what needs to be part of this? It's just not getting enough attention today.
Well, I think going back to one of the things that is working but isn't working everywhere in the world is that I think agriculture is a very diverse and decentralized business. It's hundreds of millions of people making individual decisions around the world, and every ecosystem is a little different. So this isn't one of those things where there can be direction from on high on how to go ahead and do it. We need to step up extension in many parts of the world, especially the developing world. There is a knowledge gap. We ought to have more policy that de-risks some investment, especially for the world's smallest farmers. They could make significant improvements that would make a big difference in hunger and make a big difference in poverty. And they know how to do some of these things, but they're too risky to effectively do them right here. And then finally, putting more choices, real choices, in the hands of farmers so that they can make more decisions locally that fit them. I think those are the things that, and all of these happen fairly well in some places in the world. The U.S. would be one example, and it would be an example I would give on where government has done well. They've really encouraged innovation in this country.
Take Detroit for an example. It's a place where I've spent a lot of time. You have 140 square miles inside the Detroit city lines, a population that's gone from 2 million to roughly 800,000 since the 1950s. You have abandoned plots of land, and there's been a major push and a lot of money put behind urban farming in Detroit. Is that a step that we may see there that could be positive for that city and then seen on a more massive scale globally?
I think it's positive for that city. I think it's positive for a number of places, especially where we have urban areas that are really underserved on fruits and vegetables. I don't think this is going to largely be the calorie part of the diet, but it can clearly make a difference on nutrition, and it ought to be a business opportunity for someone. So I know there are people like Will Allen that have a very good model in this kind of space. So I think it solves a couple of problems for that locality, but I wouldn't want to take that recipe and try to take it to a bunch of other places. Everything has to be fit around the situation. That's the way agriculture is because we do our business outdoors.
Yep. Glenn, what do we need that we don't have now?
Right, what's missing? It's a great question. I would say two things, and just thinking about this conference as an example. Number one, it's not just climate change, it's not just carbon. Absolutely, we need to decarbonize the economy, but there are other key sustainability issues that you need to address at the same time. We're talking about them here: water, sustainable agriculture, land conservation. So we need to be thinking about policies that integrate solutions to those things, and I think that's easy to say and hard to do. But I think in this conference, for example, having more content like this is important to diversify. And also on the note of diversification, I think we need to broaden the conversation. So in this conference, for example, we talk a lot about China and India. We don't have Chinese and Indian business leaders here, and they need to be, not only for what they're going to be doing in their own countries, which is significant, but they're also becoming global leaders. And I would add Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa. So a lot of what happens in Africa, in poor parts of South America, will be in the hands of Chinese entrepreneurs or Indian business leaders, not necessarily ourselves. So we need to broaden the conversation.
That's a good point. Rich?
I would say it's the, particularly with the rapid urbanization, it's the need for, smart urban infrastructure. This idea of planning ahead. It's not just a hyperbole to say we're going to build 11 New York cities a year. I mean, you look at places like China where they were literally a city that was a village 30 years ago is now a city of 15 million people. Right? So we are building cities from the ground up. We have the opportunity to build the infrastructure in an appropriate way. To make it intelligent and instrumented so that it has the efficiencies and the capacity to deal with this kind of growth. I think that's what's missing is the application of that on a global basis.
And I would say finally to you, Curtis, what do we need that is not more oil? Because we'll need that.
Right. Well, I think one of the things that we need right now is a price on carbon. We need some price marker because tens of billions of dollars are being invested every year and we have to get going on that. And we, that's probably the single most important thing. We need to get to the future. So I was thinking about Bill's talking about not just doing less bad, but we have to do less bad while we get on the road. And so I think the key to that is we need to start using more natural gas. I think there's a natural tendency to push back on it because it looks like the oil business, and we're trying to get away from the oil business to the new world. But there is a bridge to the new world, and the bridge will be built by natural gas, and we have to start getting on that.
I want to open it up. Any questions, guys? Right here in the middle.
Hi, thank you. The notion of 9 billion seems somewhat arbitrary, and the response seems to be, yeah, we can handle that. But if you continue, it's not going to stop at 9 billion. You're not going to reach 9 billion and say, okay, we're done now, stop. This will continue in perpetuity. And so I would ask you, the near-term response seems to be, yeah, we can handle that, and yeah, it's probably going to be a good business opportunity. But at some point, it is not going to be sustainable. And so my question is, it's going to come maybe not at 9 billion, but at some number. Then what do we do?
So what can't we handle?
Can I take that one?
When do we max out?
Yeah.
Okay.
So can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is where the optimist in me kicks in. Ed Wilson, famous Harvard biologist, talks about the idea of a bottleneck, that we're approaching a bottleneck. And the next decades will be the challenging ones, not only because population is growing, but because we're bringing people out of poverty. And those two things together create this resource crunch. But beyond 2050, if we succeed in bringing people out of poverty, the population growth rate, or the population actually stabilizes, because as people get wealthier, they have fewer children. So we're not looking at growth forever. We're looking at steep growth through 2050, then we're looking at a stabilization. So the key issue is, can we get through the bottleneck of the next several decades? That's why innovation that you all are responsible for is so important, and good policy to conserve what we've got to get us through that bottleneck is so important. But that's why I'm an optimist. We can do this over the next several decades.
But Glenn,
I would just add, add to that I 100% agree, but it's not just coming out of poverty, it's also the increasing education of these emerging markets, right? Yep. And as Bill Clinton said here last year, right, education, particularly of women, is critically important to addressing this issue. And education of this next generation of the technologies and the application of those technologies to these problems will be critically important. So.
time for one more question. Yeah, right there.
Hi, I just would like to say that it's very important to think in a global way and to have representatives from other countries. I'm from Chile. I have been here these last 3 days, and I have been really learning a lot about these issues. And for our country, for my country, it's very important to rebuild after the earthquake in a green way. So I just would like to address that. It's very important to have more people from outside, or I don't know, to think and replicate this effort, maybe in other places in Asia, South America, because it has been really important for me, and I will transmit all this information to my people. Thank you.
I think that's something that everyone agrees with. One last point, and then we're out of time. And you know, to anyone who wants to answer it, do we need more government mandates to direct action, or can we rely on businesses to make voluntary actions to prepare for what is ahead?
To me, both and.
Yeah.
I mean, we absolutely need voluntary initiatives, but voluntary alone won't get us there. You need policy, you need smart policy.
You're asking for more government involvement?
Yes.
Business?
Collaboration.
Shocking, but true.
Yeah, I mean, the economists talk about externalities, and the environment is a classic externality. It's not priced into the market. Government needs to act to get it priced into the market.
Right.
Okay.
But they can't try to pick the winners or losers. They can't try to be part of the solution. What they need to do is create the framework and then get out of the way and let business and the rest of us solve the problem itself.
Business succeeds with predictability. You know, we have to deal with a lot of things that aren't predictable, but things like you mentioned, making them predictable, we will see investment.
The only thing I would just have a little thing here. I would agree with you, except at the local level. It's important that local government not set the guidelines and get out of the way. It's important that they and where we're being successful is where the local governments are rolling up their sleeves and working side by side with us to implement these smarter systems in their cities. Again, great examples in New York, San Francisco, Singapore. So I agree perhaps at the federal level, but at the local level we need them shoulder to shoulder.
And it depends on the issue you're solving. Is it a local issue or is it a global commodity? And they're horses for courses. Yeah.
All right, guys, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thank you all. Great audience. Next up, Andy Serwer. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much. You're welcome. Thank you, guys.